I'm 69 years old, and the first thing I remember from that afternoon wasn't the pain in my hip when I hit the tiles. It was the sound my daughter-in-law made, a small, satisfied breath, like someone finally putting down a heavy bag they'd been carrying too long. That breath told me everything I needed to know about what was really happening in my own kitchen. Before I go any further, do me a favor. If you're listening from anywhere across Australia or from overseas, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments which town or city you're tuning in from. It helps more than you know, and I want to know who's walking through this with me today. My name is Malcolm Whitaker. I spent 42 years as a licensed plumber in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, running my own small outfit out of a shed behind the house in Chermside. I'm not a wealthy man in any way that matters to a magazine, but I own my home outright. I've got a decent, and I've got a modest block of land down near Caloundra that my late wife Patricia and I bought back in 1987 for a holiday cottage we never quite got around to building. Patricia passed 4 years ago just before Christmas, pancreatic cancer. She was 63. We were married 39 years. I tell you that because you need to understand the shape of the house before I tell you how they tried to take it from me. My son's name is Darren. He's 36. He works in what he calls finance, but what I've gathered, over the years, is more like a string of sales jobs where he talks a lot and delivers less. He married a woman named Celeste when he was 29. She's a property stylist, which apparently means she throws rugs over other people's couches and tells them to repaint the hallway. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I noticed, early on, that Celeste had a particular way of looking at things. At our dining table, at Patricia's jewelry box, at the plot of land down the coast. The one time we drove them past it, she looked at things the way a valuer looks at things. And I remember thinking, even then, careful, Malcolm. Careful. But I didn't say anything, because Patricia adored Darren. He was our only child. She used to say he had a soft heart, and I believed her, because she was a better judge of people than I was for most of our marriage. The one time she wasn't a better judge, it turned out, was about our son. After Patricia died, Darren started coming around more often. At first, I thought it was grief. I was grateful for it. He'd turn up on a Sunday afternoon, sometimes with Celeste, sometimes without, and we'd sit out on the back veranda and drink a beer and watch the magpies. For about 8 months. That's all it was. He'd ask how I was sleeping, whether I was eating properly, whether the pain in my knee was getting worse. I thought my son had grown up. Then, about 14 months after Patricia's funeral, the tone shifted. It was small things at first. He brought around a brochure from a retirement village in Cleveland. Just have a flick through it, Dad. Not for now. Just, for later. A few weeks later, Celeste turned up with a printout of the estimated value of the Caloundra block, in case you were curious. I wasn't curious. I hadn't asked, but she left it on the kitchen bench anyway, right next to the kettle, where I couldn't miss it. Then came the conversations about simplifying things. That was Darren's phrase. You should really think about simplifying things, Dad. You're not getting any younger. Big house, big yard. All those stairs. I'm 69, not 94. I still mow my own lawn. I still climb onto my own roof to clear the gutters. But he said it the way a grown son says it to a father he's decided is already halfway into a nursing home. Gentle, patient, condescending. The first real alarm went off on a Tuesday in March. Darren came over on his own, sat me down at the kitchen table, and slid a manila folder across to me. Inside was a draft document prepared by a solicitor I'd never heard of, based in the city. An enduring power of attorney, him as the attorney, financial and medical, effective immediately, not only upon incapacity, "It's just a precaution, Dad," he said. "In case something happens. You don't want to be one of those blokes who leaves a mess for his family." I stared at the document. I stared at my son. And I did what I'd learned to do over 42 years of being underpaid by builders and lied to by insurance assessors. I kept my face very still. "I'll have a read of it," I said. "No rush," he said. But then he added, "Would be good to get it sorted in the next fortnight, though. Celeste's cousin is a JP. She can witness it for us." That was the second thing. The witness was already lined up. The solicitor was already chosen. The document was already drafted. All that was missing was my signature. I'd like to tell you I confronted him right there. I didn't. I told him I'd think about it. I walked him to his car. I waved as he backed out of the driveway, and then I went inside, closed the front door, leaned my forehead against the wood, and stood there for a long time. Have you ever looked at someone you raised, someone you taught to ride a bike, someone you sat up with through fevers, and realized they were no longer looking at you as a father, that they were looking at you as a delay, as the final obstacle between themselves and something they'd already mentally spent? That's the moment I want you to sit with. Because everything I did after that came out of that moment. The next morning, I did 3 things. I drove to my own solicitor, a woman named Bronwyn Hatcher, who'd handled Patricia's estate and whom I'd known for 20-odd years. I sat down in her office and I told her exactly what had happened. She asked me one question. "Malcolm, do you trust him?" And I realized with a kind of cold clarity that I didn't. Not anymore. Bronwyn walked me through my options. We updated my will that afternoon, with a specific clause disinheriting any beneficiary who attempted to exert undue influence over me, procured fraudulent legal documents, or committed any act of violence or financial abuse against me. We drafted a new enduring power of attorney, naming Bronwyn's firm as the attorney, to be activated only on certified medical incapacity. We put the Caloundra block into a discretionary trust with myself as sole appointer, and she gave me the name of a man she said I ought to meet. A retired detective sergeant named Eric Kowalski, who ran a small consultancy helping older Australians document elder abuse. The second thing I did was drive to a hardware shop in Stafford and buy 4 small wireless security cameras, the kind that record to a cloud service. I installed them myself the next day. One in the kitchen, one in the lounge, one covering the front door, and one in my study, where I kept the filing cabinet. I didn't tell a soul. The third thing I did was call my old mate Trevor, who'd been best man at my wedding. Trevor is a retired copper from Redcliffe. I didn't tell him everything. I just asked him if he'd be willing to be a character witness, and possibly a physical presence, if things got rough down the track. Trevor didn't ask questions. Trevor has never asked questions. He just said, "Whatever you need, Mal." That's what 39 years of friendship sounds like. Now, here's the part that's going to make some of you shake your heads. I didn't confront Darren. I didn't ring him up and tell him the power of attorney was off the table. I smiled. I played along. I let him think I was considering it. I did that for 3 reasons. First, because Bronwyn told me that the stronger my documentation of their pattern of behavior, the stronger my legal position would be if it escalated. Second, because I'd been married to Patricia long enough to know that you don't corner a person who thinks they're winning. You let them keep thinking it. And third, because a small, quiet part of me still hoped I was wrong. I was hoping my son would wake up one morning and be ashamed of himself. I was hoping I'd get to destroy the documents and never tell him I knew. That hope lasted about 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, I recorded every conversation. Queensland is a one-party consent state for audio recording in private conversations where one party is present, so I was within my rights. I kept a written log of every visit, every phone call, every text message. I noticed Celeste coming around more, asking about the bank accounts, asking whether I'd thought any more about what Darren mentioned. I noticed Darren starting to comment. in front of other people, that I seemed a bit forgetful lately. I hadn't been forgetful at all. He was laying the groundwork, I realized, for a story. A story about a confused old man who couldn't manage his own affairs and needed his loving son to step in. The cameras caught all of it. Including the afternoon, Celeste went through the drawer in my study while I was out back, hanging, washing. She didn't take anything. She was looking for something, probably the will. Probably the deed to the calandra block. I watched the footage that night, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Something I'd never felt about my own flesh and blood before. I felt the word stranger. The turning point came on a Saturday in late April. Darren rang me Friday evening and said they wanted to come round the next afternoon to have a proper chat, Dad. Just the three of us. We want to help you make a plan. I knew what that meant. I rang Bronwyn that night at home. I rang Trevor, and I rang Eric Kowalski, the retired detective. I told all three of them what was coming. Bronwyn told me to check the camera batteries and make sure everything was recording in the cloud. Eric told me to keep my phone in my pocket, not on the bench, and to memorize a specific number he gave me. Trevor told me he'd be parked around the corner in his ute from 1 o'clock, listening on a mobile I'd leave on silent call in my back pocket. I barely slept that night. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Patricia for 39 years, and I apologized to her, out loud, for what was about to happen to the son we'd raised. I told her I was sorry I hadn't been wiser, sooner. I told her I hoped she'd understand. And somewhere in the early hours, I made my peace with it. I wasn't protecting a stranger. I was protecting her 42 years of scrimping, her years of night shift work at the hospital, the calandra block we'd bought together the summer our son was born. I was protecting the life we'd built. If he wanted to come and try to take it, he was going to find out that a quiet man is not the same as a weak man. They arrived at 2 o'clock sharp. Celeste brought a cake. Darren brought a folder. That folder. Same one from March, but now thicker. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd fed Darren porridge when he was 4. Celeste poured the tea. Darren opened the folder. "Dad," he said, and his voice had that tone I'd started calling, in my own head, the funeral director voice. "We've been really worried about you. We've spoken to some professionals. We think it's time to put some things in place." "What sort of things, son?" I asked. I kept my voice mild. I kept my hands on the table. "Power of attorney," he said. "And we think it's time to start looking at transferring the calandra property, for tax reasons, into my name. You'd still have the use of it, obviously, but it would be off your books." "Simpler," Celeste chimed in. "We just want to protect you, Malcolm. There are so many scams targeting older people these days. If something happened to you and you weren't in a position to manage things, it could be a disaster." I let them talk. I let them lay it all out. 40 minutes of it. Darren started telling me about a cognitive assessment he thought I should do, through a doctor he knew. Celeste started telling me about a lovely place in Cleveland where I could downsize and really enjoy your retirement. They had it all mapped out. The house I'd owned for 34 years, the land Patricia and I had bought, my superannuation, the lot, and then Darren pulled out a pen. "We brought the JP," he said. "She's in the car. If you're happy, Dad, we can just get this bit sorted today. Get it off the to-do list." I looked at my son. I looked at his wife. I looked at the kitchen clock, which read 10 minutes to 3. Trevor had been parked around the corner for 2 hours. The cameras were running. My solicitor had a triggered email sitting in her drafts, waiting for me to send her a single full stop as a signal. My phone was on an open line to the mobile on Trevor's dashboard, and I said very quietly, "No." Darren blinked. "Sorry, Dad? No," I said. "I'm not signing anything. I'm not transferring anything. I'm not moving into anywhere. I'm not taking a cognitive assessment with your mate, and I'd like you both to leave my house, please." There was a long silence. Celeste's face did something interesting. It went from concerned to blank, to something harder than either. Darren's jaw tightened. He looked at his wife. She gave him a small, almost invisible nod. "Dad," he said, and the funeral director voice was gone now. "Don't be difficult. We've come a long way with this. A lot of people have gone to a lot of effort. I didn't ask them to," I said. "And I'm asking you to leave." He stood up. That was the first shift. A man stands up in a different way when he's stopped pretending. He stands up with his shoulders. He stood up with his, and he came around the side of the table, and he stood very close to me. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "You're not well, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. You need us." "I'm thinking very clearly," I said. Probably for the first time in a year, and that's when he shoved me. It wasn't a hit. It was a shove, 2 hands, flat on my chest, hard. I went backwards over the chair and down onto the kitchen tiles. My hip hit the floor first, then my elbow. Then the back of my head cracked against the leg of the table. I felt something hot in my mouth. I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. I tasted the iron again, same as the start of this story. And for a moment, I couldn't quite remember how I'd got there. I heard Celeste say, very softly, "Darren, Jesus." And then I heard her say, a second later, in an entirely different voice, "Well, now, we know he's a fall risk." That was the breath I mentioned at the beginning. That small, satisfied exhale. That was the moment I stopped being her father-in-law and became her solution. I lay on the tiles and I looked up at my son. My son, who'd had the mumps when he was 5 and cried in my arms. My son, who I'd taught to shave. My son, standing over his father on the kitchen floor, with blood running down his father's chin. And what I saw in his face was not horror. It was calculation. He was working out how to tell the story. I reached for the phone in my back pocket. Slowly, deliberately, Darren laughed. He actually laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Go on, Dad. Ring the police. See who they believe." A confused old man who fell off his chair, or his son and daughter-in-law who came round to help him with his paperwork. "No one's going to believe you, Malcolm," Celeste said. And she was smiling now. "You fell. You're unwell. That's what happened." I pulled the phone out. I didn't ring 000. I didn't have to. Trevor was already on the line, had been the whole time, had heard everything. What I did was press one single button. I sent the full stop to Bronwyn, and then I said, loud and clear, for the cameras and for the open line, "My son just assaulted me in my own kitchen. My daughter-in-law is standing next to him. I'm on the floor. I'm bleeding. And I've recorded everything." Darren's face changed. Not all at once. In stages. Confusion first. Then, a kind of dawning. "What do you mean, recorded?" I pointed up. At the small white camera above the kitchen cabinets, the one he'd never noticed, because he'd never looked for it. "That one's been on since 10 this morning, I said. "There's 3 more. One in the lounge, one over the front door, one in the study, which filmed your wife going through my filing cabinet 3 weeks ago." Celeste actually stepped back, like the camera might bite her. "You're bluffing," Darren said. But his voice had no bottom to it. "I rang Bronwyn an hour ago," I said. "She's already sent the footage from the last 6 weeks to her office server. I've got a retired detective on standby. I've got Trevor Dooley parked around the corner, listening to this on an open phone line, and the police are already on their way. Because Trevor rang them the moment you shoved me. The front doorbell rang. You could have heard a pin drop in that kitchen." Darren looked at the door. He looked at Celeste. He looked at me, on the floor, and for 1 second, one very long second, I saw him consider running. I saw the thought cross his face. I was his father. I still knew him better than anyone else in that room. I saw him think about bolting out the back. "Don't," I said. "It's done, son. It's done." 2 officers from Queensland Police came through the front door. Trevor came in behind them, and the look on his face when he saw me on the floor is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and crouched down next to me and said, "Christ, Mal," and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he didn't move it for 10 minutes. The senior officer, a woman in her 40s, took my statement. Then she took Darren's. Then she took Celeste's. She watched the camera footage on my tablet, sitting right there at my kitchen table, and I saw her jaw set tighter and tighter with each minute. When she finished, she stood up, and she looked at my son, and she said, "Darren Whitaker, you're under arrest for common assault, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. You do not have to say anything." I didn't hear the rest of the caution. I was watching my daughter-in-law, who was being spoken to by the second officer, and she was already crying and saying she had nothing to do with it, that it had all been Darren's idea, that she'd tried to stop him. The cameras told a different story. The cameras told a very different story. The ambulance took me to the Prince Charles. Concussion, bruised hip, split lip, nothing broken. They kept me overnight for observation. Trevor stayed in the chair next to the bed the whole night. Didn't sleep. Neither did I, really. I just lay there and I thought about Patricia. And I thought about the boy Darren had been. And I tried to work out where we'd gone wrong. I don't know that I ever did. I don't know that anyone ever does. The legal process took 14 months. I want to tell you how it ended, because the comments on stories like this always ask, and the people asking deserve answers. Darren was charged with common assault, elder abuse under Queensland's new protections, and fraud for the attempted procurement of the power of attorney and the property transfer under false pretenses. He pleaded not guilty at first. His solicitor tried to have the camera footage excluded. The magistrate watched 15 minutes of it and denied the application within the hour. Darren then changed his plea to guilty on all 3 charges. He received a sentence of 2 years and 8 months, with eligibility for parole after 12 months. He served 11. He lost his job before the sentencing because his employer did background checks. His marriage didn't survive the trial. Celeste was charged with being an accessory and with a separate count of attempted fraud related to the filing cabinet footage. She was given a suspended sentence of 12 months and 300 hours of community service. She lost her property styling business. The last I heard, she moved to Perth. I don't look for her. I don't look for Darren either. Not yet. Maybe not. Ever. The house is still mine. The Caloundra block is still mine. Patricia's jewelry is still in the box on my dresser. I changed the locks the afternoon I came home from hospital. I had a proper security system installed the following week. I wrote a new will. Under the new will, if I die tomorrow, everything goes into a charitable trust for the Royal Brisbane Palliative Care Unit, where Patricia was looked after in her final weeks. Darren gets nothing. It isn't vindictiveness. It's arithmetic. You don't leave your life savings to someone who was willing to put you on a kitchen floor for them. I want to finish with some things I wish someone had told me when I was 50, because I know there are people watching this who are where I was 5 years ago, and I'd rather you learn from me than from your own kitchen floor. First, love your children, but don't mistake love for trust. They are 2 different currencies. You can owe one without owing the other. A grown child who is pressuring you to sign documents, to move house, to hand over access to your accounts, is not acting out of love, no matter how they dress it up. Love doesn't have a deadline on the paperwork. Second, get your legal affairs in order early. With a solicitor you chose, not one chosen for you. Have a will. Have an enduring power of attorney that activates only on certified incapacity, not effective immediately. Put significant assets in a trust structure if your situation allows it. And review these documents every 3 to 5 years or after any major family change. Third, trust your instincts. If something your adult child is saying to you feels wrong, it probably is. The quiet voice in the back of your head that says something's off has been keeping human beings alive for 200,000 years. Don't override it out of guilt. Guilt is not evidence. Fourth, document. I can't say this strongly enough. If you sense something is going sideways, start a diary. Save the text messages. Keep the emails. Install a small camera if you can. The law has gotten much better in Australia at protecting older people from elder abuse, but the law runs on evidence, and evidence is built quietly, over time, long before the emergency. Fifth, keep your people. Keep your Trevor. Keep the mate you went to school with, the neighbor who checks on you, the old workmate who still rings at Christmas. Loneliness is what predators feed on, including the ones inside your own family. Pick up the phone. Go for the coffee. Stay in the world. And last, being a good father does not mean being a doormat. There is no version of good parenting that requires you to be destroyed by your child. If someone is hurting you, it doesn't matter whose name is on their birth certificate. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to press charges. You are allowed to survive. I'm 69 years old. I still mow my own lawn in Chermside. I still drive down to Caloundra on the long weekends and sit on the empty block and have a beer and talk to Patricia out loud. Because old blokes are allowed to do that. I have a new routine in the mornings. I have a small circle of very good people around me. I sleep with the doors locked. I'm not bitter, most days. I'm just awake now, in a way I wasn't before. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking through it with me. If any part of this hit close to home, I want you to do one thing this week. Ring your solicitor. Or find one. Start the conversation. Don't wait for the afternoon with the folder on the table. Don't wait for the taste of iron. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've got a story of your own, share it. Someone else needs to hear it. And if you're in Australia and you suspect elder abuse, please contact the Elder Abuse phone line on 1-800-ELDER-HELP. You're not alone. You never were. Look after each other out there. And look after yourselves.